Welcome to Misteyre Creations. We discuss strange places today. My name is AJ, your host, and today we have author and professional podcaster Brennan Storr with us. Without further ado, on to the show. Welcome, Brennan.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Can you give us an introduction of yourself and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Brennan Storr. I'm the host of the Ghost Story Guys podcast, as well as Largely the Truth with Brennan Storr, which is a non-paranormal chat show. And I'm also the author of A Strange Little Place, which is currently out of print. It just went out of print, I want to say, 2 weeks ago, but it will be back in print in the fall through Beyond the Fray publishing. So there'll be a revised and expanded version of A Strange Little Place, again, hopefully out in the fall, but possibly spring 2023. And yeah, that's what I do. I mean, I also produce I'm also part of the web show, part of the live show, I'm also part of the YouTube live show, Weird Together, which is sort of a paranormal, where we talk about paranormal entertainment. I produce the podcast LukeLore, hosted by Luke Greensmith, and a few other things as well. I'm a busy guy.
Right on. If you're willing to, can you tell us a little bit about your own experience with writing the book and the subjects in it?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I started writing Strange in 2012, so 10 years ago now, which is kind of wild to think about. Actually, would be 10 years ago this month, I think I took my first research trip. And yeah, it's kind of crazy how this all works out. But to be honest, I wasn't a believer when I started writing the book. I just liked cool, creepy stories. And I had a couple weird things happen in my first apartment, and I would tell those stories at parties or to friends. But over time, I started, I was out for a walk with a friend of mine, and I was telling her these stories, and I kind of got this thought. I thought, I wonder if I could make a book out of this, And I'd always kind of fancied myself a writer, and I'd blogged a little bit, but I'd never really committed to and finished anything of any real length. So I thought, well, we'll give it a shot. And I went back to Revelstoke, which is my hometown, because I decided that the book would be all these stories from when I was growing up and all this kind of stuff. And I started talking to people. I started talking to my family, because I used to hear a lot of stories from them. And it kind of turned out that they didn't really remember many of them, which was a pain. So I kind of was not sure it was going to work out, but then they started connecting me, specifically my mother, connected me to some friends of hers who had had experiences. And they connected me to other people, and so on and so forth. And, by the time the book was done, it came out in 2016, I had uncovered more stories than I think anyone knew existed in Revelstoke, because there are some famous haunted houses in town, famous locally. Places like Holton House, or actually, I want to say Holton House is probably the only one that's really famous. It's this really lovely Queen Anne style house at the top of a big hill. I believe it was built in 1897. Yeah, so this was all new, and it wasn't just ghost stories or paranormal stories. I mean, there was also Bigfoot stories, a sea creature, like a lake monster story, a number of UFO stories, and the expanded edition of the book, which is coming out later in the year, that will also include mention of the missing people in the region. There are quite a few missing people. There have been quite a few missing people there over the years.
Yeah.
So it all kind of started as like, let's see if I can actually do this thing, and it kind of grew from there. And along the way, I had my first ever, I shouldn't say first ever, as an adult, my first ever truly paranormal experience, and I could no longer ignore what I was researching. I was kind of keeping it at arm's length for a long time.
Yeah.
Then I had a paranormal experience, and I realized I didn't know as much about the world as I thought I did.
It's funny how things happen like that.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
And you could be going along for years, and then all of a sudden it's like a slap in the face. You
Yeah.
have to kind of take stock when that sort of thing happens. Yeah.
Well, I sort of realized after that, and other things kept happening. This had been a part of my life for a really long time. I just had not really understood it. And I'd spent a long time trying to ignore it. Or, I was raised Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And, so I was baptized, confirmed. But I didn't really like it. I was very difficult for me. I found it very unpleasant. My family's Italian, so it's just expected that you go to catechism, and I really didn't enjoy it. So when I got a little older, I became, sort of an atheist. That was my thing, right? I don't believe in anything, man. So the things I thought I had experienced couldn't possibly be real because these things don't really happen. But I realized that this had been part of my life all this time, and I think it was just waiting for me to kind of accept it. Yeah, exactly. Accept it and just kind of turn into the wind and go, okay, yeah, you're right, fine. And I remember years ago I was in New Orleans, and I was in I can't remember the name of the square there, maybe Jackson Square, but something like that. But anyways, at nighttime in the French Quarter, there's this part of the park where tarot readers will set up tables. And so you kind of, I like to hang out there sometimes, just kind of see it, all these tables set up with little lights on them. And I was kind of cruising around there, and I ran into this artist who did these really very, very evocative splatter paintings of Jesus on the cross. Like when I say splatter, I mean like he kind of Jackson Pollock style flicking paint at the canvas.
Okay.
And I got talking to this guy. And over the course of the conversation, which was very, very strange, and I won't get into all of it, but it became very apparent that we both have an interest in these things, this subtle world that you and I kind of deal with on the day-to-day now. But at the time, I didn't really. But I was telling him about some of my interests and some of the things I was learning, and the way he put it always kind of stuck with me. He said, those places you're talking about, they're called the principalities. And he said, the thing about the principalities is the further into them you push, the more they become aware of you. Mm-hmm. And they watch and they see you. And so I've sort of just taken that now as, okay, I'm in the principalities, so I just kind of have to deal with it. I don't necessarily know what any of it means, but I reached a point where I could no longer say, well, no, that's just not true, because something's happening.
Yeah. I think when you're first presented with this and you really take stock of it, you end up kind of going all in. Did you just, when that happened, did you just feel, I got to get into this and find out what this is, whether I'm insane or is this really happening? I had that kind of experience myself, where for a long time I thought, this is a little bit nuts. Well, I have to explore it. And I found over time that once you start looking into it, more stuff starts happening. Did you find that that once you started really taking stock of what you were seeing, did it amp up?
Sort of. I mean, the most dramatic things I would ever see are the things that more or less happened right at the beginning. There was one other thing that happened, and I do think that there's a combination of me taking more of an interest in the subject and really going crazy on it. I think I read something like 50 or 60 books on the subject of the paranormal, and because I didn't know anything, right? I had to learn everything from the ground up.
Yeah.
And basically what kind of happened in the end is, as I said, I had my initial encounter, which was a shadow person thing, and I'd never seen or even heard of shadow people back then.
Okay.
But then the last time I saw them was the year after the first time, so 2013. And really ever since then, it's been more minor stuff, but it's been more present. So, when those things happened, it was like, boom. But that was all that happened. Whereas in the years that followed, I just became more accustomed to little things, to feeling more sensitive about stuff. So, I might be in a place where I think, you know what, I don't feel like I should be here, and you leave. I was just a little more in tune with that. But I would say it was only a handful of times that I ever really saw anything particularly dramatic. And again, there's only one thing maybe I saw that was as dramatic as a straight up shadow people. But that came because the book sold fine. It wasn't, no one's making money off it. Well, I wasn't making money off it, but my publisher did, not too bad. But book sold fine, and but the thing I really got from it was the ghost story guys. That the book led me to the podcast, and it led me to doing the podcast. And so when we first started the show, and my former co-host Ian and I started the show, we started it in my office. And at the time, I was working as the office manager for a consulting company.
Okay.
And so it turns out that the office we started it in, the building we started it in, was deeply, deeply haunted. Like, deeply haunted. And so what I really started noticing is that, when we would record, especially on nights when we would record, things would really ramp up. So you would hear noises. We caught a couple odd EVPs on the equipment. Mm-hmm. I would say, yeah, we just had a lot of unusual stuff happen. And again, but it was never as, pardon me, I'm drifting a bit, but it was never as dramatic as what happened the first time. So it was never like, again, a full-on shadow entity showing itself. It was never, excuse me, I was actually touched by a shadow person. That was part of my first experience. And it was very, very upsetting. That never happened again. So, okay. But it was just a constant sort of parade, like stream of, like little things, seeing shadows. I can tell you one of the stories if you're interested.
Go ahead. I love to hear stories.
Okay, so when I worked originally for this forestry consultancy, I worked for about 6.5 years. Mm-hmm. And so when I started, our office was on the second floor. Now, I should say it was on the left side of the second floor if you're looking at the building. And the very first time I saw a shadow person was there. I was telling the secretary at work about the research trip I'd taken. She was telling me some ghost stories. And again, beautiful April morning, I want to say. Sun's out. And it was a big office, about 1,600 square feet.
Yeah.
So behind her is my boss's office. To the left of that, to the right of that was my one of the programmers. Then the office next to that was mine. We were alone in the building. Or I should say, rather, we were alone in the office. And as we were talking, I saw this all-black head peek out from the doorway. From behind a coat rack in the programmer's office.
Okay.
And it held there just long enough
for you to see it.
For me to see it. And then it went back. And I started panicking internally. I remember I felt the colors draining out of the day. I was scared. And I just shoved all that way down and did that thing that a lot of people do, where you say, no, I didn't see that. I didn't see that. So, as I said, that was my first, and again, I saw the shadow figure again, but the office was the first place I saw it. And I used to like to hang out there at night because, again, I had an office and, I could watch movies. Sometimes my buddies would come over, we'd have a beer and say, watch a movie in my office. And so on this one occasion, that was the plan. Now, to get into the office at night, it was easiest to park on the third floor of the adjacent parkade and go through the connecting door.
Okay.
So once you're through the connecting door, there's a short hallway, and then a left goes into the grand staircase, and you go down 2 flights of stairs, and you're at our door. Mm-hmm. So on this particular night, we pulled up to the door, opened it, and the hallway light was off, which is not unusual necessarily. It would get turned off, but it seemed much darker than it should be, if that makes sense. It was much darker than we had ever seen it, and there was still a single light on. It's just most of the lights were off, but it was too dark. So my friend and I looked at each other and we thought, well, that's odd. But we walked in, and just as we got to the end of the hallway, to the left turn which leads into the grand staircase, I just felt goosebumps go up all over my body. And I peeked down over the banister to the landing where the office door was. Now, I should say the grand staircase is, one wall is just a stained glass window, across from which is a streetlight. So it's fairly well lit in the evening, even if the lights are off. Well, I could see, even though the grand lights were off, I could see through the stained glass window and the streetlight almost all the staircase, except for the landing at the bottom of the stairs next to the office door, which had this incredible black mass. There was such a collection of shadows that it shouldn't have been possible. It shouldn't have been that dark. And the more I looked at it, the more the hair went up on my arms. And I thought, okay, my friend and I both, she felt it too, so we backed off. And we stood outside the we went back out to the parkade, and we just had the door open. And we thought, we're being stupid. We're looking at each other. Come on. Like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. So go back in and get to the top of the stairs. Can't even get as close to the top of the stairs before the hair comes up on the arms. And looked at each other again, thought, okay, we're definitely not going down there. Left the office again. And again, we're standing there, we're holding the door open, looking at each other, thinking, well, I guess we're not doing that. Let's go for a beer. We'll have to go for a beer like in a bar.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we felt this hot wind blow past us. And I didn't think much of it when it blew past us because we thought, maybe the heater just turned on, the furnace just turned on, and this is just the forced air coming out. We didn't really pay attention until that same warm breeze sucked in back past us. It was almost like the building was breathing. And we watched, and I kid you not, as that wind went past us back into the building, those shadows that I described, they receded like a tide on the beach, leaving the hallway the regular level of dark. I actually saw darkness flow backwards like a liquid almost.
Okay.
And I've only ever seen that twice in my life, but that was the first time, and it was incredible. And we went back in, and sure enough, that the light was reaching all the way to the bottom of the stairs. The mass was in front of the door was gone.
That's very, very interesting. I've had instances where dark masses will kind of come in, and
right.
And you will feel it right away, but a lot of times whatever is there is of ill intent. Did you feel like something was going to attack you if you went in?
Well, eventually when I started the show, by the time I'd started the show, we had moved up to the office on the third floor. So we'd gone from the second to the third. And it was much easier to be there. It feels like whatever was happening with that building is primarily happening on the second floor. But we had a listener who eventually came to look at the place, and she has some sensitivity and is kind of a medium. And she explained that the building is kind of like on a freeway. And so things pass through. And she said there are two regular things that live there. She said there are two entities who occupy that space at different times. She said one is quite positive and just kind of wants to keep an eye on you guys. The other is quite negative. And so I suspect that is what I felt that night, because there would be times, it got worse the longer I worked there. And I don't know if that's because I became more sensitive to it, but definitely I would notice that after, say, 10 o'clock, it would become much, it's hard to explain. It just felt less welcoming. It felt like you were in someone else's space. And there was one particular night, we were getting ready to move out upstairs, and my buddy was going to come by after work again to shoot the breeze, then go for a drive. And he worked pizza delivery till 11 p.m. So ordinarily I wouldn't stay there that long, because by this point it was getting pretty bad at night. Again, it's hard to explain the feeling. It's just this feeling of menace, but you never saw anything. So I hung around later than I would, and I knew he finished work at 11. It takes him about 20 minutes to park the car and file his receipts and all this stuff. So I'm hanging out in my office, and I should mention that eventually I had bought what's it called? Maybe it's magnetite. It's a kind of rock with a high iron content. And I put that over the door to the front door to the office. And I also put it above the door to my office. And so that night, as I was waiting for my friend, I could feel this tide, this sense of menace come on, but it would only ever come as far as my door. And I truly think it was the iron content of that stone which was keeping it away. And the friend who was coming was completely non-receptive to these things. So it's almost like, I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you've got someone who has almost no sensitivity, it's almost like you kind of lose connection with whatever it is, so it doesn't seem to affect you as much. Well, so I was waiting for my friend, because again, he had zero reactivity to the paranormal. But 11 came and 11 went, and 11:30 came and 11:30 went. And the whole time I can feel it getting worse outside. I can feel it getting worse just outside my office door. And finally, I heard from him at midnight, because I was getting worried. And he said, I'm really sorry. He said that for no reason whatsoever, the car broke down, the delivery car.
Okay.
And he said, I couldn't reach you. So he said, I'm not going to be there tonight. So, we'll catch up another night. But now I had to get out of there while all this shit was massing outside my door. And I remember sitting there and waiting, basically. And what I had noticed is it seems to come in waves. So it would go and then come, and go and then come back. So when it went out, which was still not great, but better than, when it was in, I just booked it, man. I booked it to the door, turned on the security alarm, and hit the road. And I was so happy when we got the new security system where I could just set it with my phone remotely, so I didn't have to wait for everything to settle. But it was rough. And that office, a lot of stuff happened there. We had the motion sensors would be set off, and they were set to the least sensitive setting, but they would be set off at different points. There was one occasion where I discovered that the building did not like you talking about it on the phone.
Okay.
And so I was having a chat with a friend of mine, and we had caught up in a while, and I was at work, but the bosses weren't around, so I could have some personal time. And the conversation was going fine. Everything was connecting as well as it should. But then I started telling my friend about the building, about the spooky stuff that happens in the building. Well, his connection starts fading, and I can't hear him quite as well. He can't hear me. And then the connection kind of goes completely, and I hear what sounds like, I can hear him talking, but it's heavily distorted. It sounded kind of like this. It sounded kind of like weird slowed down tape speak. So I hung up the phone, called him back, and said, "Hey man, what the hell were you just saying?" And he said, "I thought that was you speaking."
Ooh.
And and this is like an iPhone 7, this is, or something. This is not, my Nokia 5500. This is a reasonably new phone that this happened on. So I started telling him more about the building, and the connection kept fading and dropping. But when I would talk about other things, it would stay stable as a rock. So I tried it. I went outside talking about normal stuff. Started, working fine. I started talking about spooky stuff, working fine. Kept talking about spooky stuff, went back in the building, same thing, connection died. So it was almost like the building just did not want you talking about it and would kind of mess with your electronics to make sure you didn't. And I think working there as much as I did, really sensitized me to the paranormal, because I would have a lot of little stuff happen when I wasn't at work. But once that office closed, because the company sold, essentially, there's a very long story, but I was laid off. I got them to a place where they didn't need an admin assistant anymore, which was kind of my point all along, because I didn't really like the work. And then I ended up moving my own business into the office and blah, 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 blah. But when we finally gave up the office completely, I've noticed that my experience with the paranormal doesn't happen as much. So I think constantly being in this place where these entities were, I think it just kind of somehow sensitized me to it. Mm. And every now and again I'll walk past the building and it still feels very, very active.
That's what I would call the tide.
Oh, interesting. You've had experience with this.
It's when I was a kid, I lived in an area that was reputed to be a native burial ground.
Interesting.
And you'd get a tide of just weird energy. It would come and go, and everyone in the area had experiences. It was
Interesting.
really um I don't really like the idea of native burial grounds as a trope,
I'm right there with you. Yeah, absolutely.
but whatever this was, it was right next to a rock quarry. So it could have been just the quartz in the area attracting all the attention
Right.
rather than because I never researched the the history of the area, but I know that it was a big Mi'kmaq area where
Okay.
people gathered because it's a lake. It's but
Right.
it's a chain of lakes. There's like 12 lakes, and they were always rich in fish. So it would have been a camping area where people come, and they would have had people die and buried in the area. So I can understand that kind of a thought, but there was up on the hill a guy went insane, murdered his entire family, and shot himself in the basement.
Oh my God.
And then the new family came in, my neighbors, and my parents had a kids club for all the kids in the area. So the kids were talking and telling stories. And apparently, in their home where Buddy shot himself, the blood would never go away.
Oh
They would
wow.
repaint and use all kinds of solvents to get rid of stuff, and it would reappear on the wall.
Interesting.
And one Halloween, we were joking around, and one of us had the great idea of using a spirit board.
Oh.
I would never use it because my mother had one, and I always felt bad vibes from that,
Right.
or that particular board. As soon as they did that, it was like a wall of blacker than blackness came through the building and just
Oh.
went right through. Like it was like a herd of elephants went through the building. The whole thing shook. People flipped out. The kids all ran, and I was there with two other people, and it just went right through us and went on. It just it wasn't like it didn't stay in the building, but we could hear voices of people, and we said, okay, this is a nope situation, and we noped out of there.
Yeah.
And I never ever played with the spirit board since then.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
And
I never have, but that would that's one of the reasons. Stuff like
yeah,
that.
well, I think since then I was like 12 or 13 when this happened, so I
Right.
wasn't that old. And then at 16, I took up magical practice and learning about magic and that sort of thing. Um, and it was at that point that I had my own experience that I can remember, where a ghost tried to strangle me in my sleep.
Oh.
I woke up and there was this like a shadow person over me, and I
Right.
felt pressure of something on my throat. It was
Jeez.
directly on my throat, and all I heard in my head was die.
Oh my God.
And I started struggling, and I told it to fuck off.
Right.
And it's when I said fuck off and I meant it, its eyes flashed like a red color and it disappeared.
Interesting.
And it was basically me energetically saying, "Get the hell away from me! I
Yeah.
don't want you in my room." Um, but weirdly, I know that's a human spirit that was doing that, not like a demon or something really malevolent, like
Right.
an elemental or something like that.
The idea
Because
of... Oh, sorry. Please
go
continue.
ahead, go ahead.
No, no.
Um, the idea of demons and that really doesn't compute with me.
I'm right there with you.
Uh, I believe in daemons, which can be good or bad,
Right?
depending on the situation. It's more a general idea of spirits that have not been human.
Okay, yeah, sure.
It could be an animal spirit. It could be an actual demon, like a real malevolent kill you type thing,
Right.
or something masquerading as that. Which in this case, it was a masquerading creature or masquerading person trying to look like that creature.
Interesting. It's funny you say that because the episode that's coming out tomorrow of Ghost Story Guys, episode 134, is about the Hat Man.
Yeah.
And there are definitely seem to be Hat Man encounters where they're intentionally obscuring their identity. It's like they should have features, but there is one person I think described gray smoke. Someone else described like a silver liquid that reflected light. And so it does seem like there's this element of... There's even one person who felt like they maybe knew the person, but it obviously had no features. And so, yeah, it's interesting to say that because I'm starting to wonder if there is an element of obfuscation with shadow people. If they're not necessarily entities we can't understand, they're maybe people just hiding who they really are.
We'll be right back. I just noticed we talked for half an hour and didn't get to any questions.
This is a danger with me, Alan.
It's
I should have warned
great.
you. I'm a talker.
I love it. Um, Revelstoke, it has attributes of a window area. Do you know what that is?
I do.
What's your thoughts on Revelstoke being a window area?
Oh, it most certainly is. Yeah. I didn't really understand it growing up. I didn't really notice, because it's like fish in water, right? You're in it, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
But when I started to write the book, I really started to see it. And now that the book is out, actually, I kind of have a difficult time going back to Revelstoke.
Okay.
And I find it energetically very difficult for me to be there. And some of that's just, going home to my family, and, I wasn't exactly the happiest kid in the world. So some of that's just, bad memories.
Yeah.
But also, it's like whatever is there, whatever entity is there, because I think there is a large governing entity there.
Okay.
In addition to regular just weirdness. I think it's more aware of me now, and I think that's harder to be around. For instance, I went back to visit my family once a couple of years ago. More than that now, thanks pandemic. But so it was maybe 2018 this happened. I was driving around, and I just said, I literally was looking at the mountain, and I felt the mountain was looking back at me. And for the listeners who don't know, I assume most do, Revelstoke is a small town in Western Canada. It's on the main highway. It's on the Trans-Canada, but it's fairly isolated. It's 45 minutes to the west before you get to another town. It's an hour and a half to the east before you get to another town. The road north dead ends in a very small community and a dam, and it takes about 3 hours to get to the small community. The road south dead ends in a lake, which you could take a ferry across it, but the road itself just dead ends. And it's surrounded on all sides by about 7,500 feet of vertical mountain. Revelstoke is about 1,500 feet elevation. The mountains around it rise up to about 9,000 feet. We're a very popular ski destination. It's actually become very much a ski town ever since I left.
Okay.
And so it's a very visually striking place, but it's also, like I said, very, very strange. And I was looking at this mountain one day as I was kind of driving from the place where I was staying to visit my mom, and I just remember saying kind of out loud, "Hey, if you want to talk, I'm around. I'm interested in to hear what you got to say.
Okay.
And I was kind of just speaking to the mountain. Well, that night, I always used to stay at my aunt's house when I was in town. My aunt's got a big place. She's got lots of room. And it's right on the river. And I do think the Columbia River is one of the things that creates this set of conditions. You know, the Revelstoke sits at the confluence of two rivers, the Illecillewaet and the Columbia. And it also, the Inacomplu River joins the Columbia later. So there are a number of rivers coming together. And of course, a lot of people think that it sort of indicates a place of power. And certainly, you know, a lot of this stuff is centered around the river. And I mean, we can get into that at some point. But anyways, being right next to the river, my aunt's house always felt off. So I would sort of do a white light visualization exercise to get to sleep. So I would just imagine my bed encased in a glowing white box that, you know, was impenetrable. And I would do that all the time, but didn't think anything of it. Never really mattered one way or the other. You know, I assumed it's just helping me sleep. But that night, after I spoke to the mountain, I had this dream, and I didn't make the connection until days later. But in that dream, I was in the back of a white Jeep. And that Jeep was in the woods, and so it was like a metal box around me. And this huge black dinosaur thing was trying to smash its way into the box with its head. And it couldn't get in. It could crumple the doors, it could crumple the walls a little bit, but it couldn't get in. And I remember just seeing through the cracks this huge dinosaur-like thing, but like a shadow person dinosaur.
Okay.
And I woke up because, you know, it's a hard thing to stay asleep through. And, and I realized sort of maybe the day or two later, I think that was the answer to my question. I think that was the mountain coming to speak, but it was too much. Whatever, like the enormous power that it represented, I think it was just too much for my brain. I couldn't deal with it. And like I say, ever since, being in Revelstoke has been tough. I just feel really depleted. And
guess you're protecting yourself.
You know, I think you might be right. I think that might be a big part of it. Without even realizing I'm doing it, I think that might be it. I know, certainly I feel less safe being in certain parts of it now. And Revelstoke's a very safe place. You know, I mean, yeah, it's a town of 7,500 people, and sure, you have crime, but it's, you know, I guess, yeah, most of the crime happens to people who live there. So as a tourist, which I am now, it's fine. But I don't know. Some places, I get the impression that if I go there, I'm not coming back.
Okay. You said that it's a confluence of two rivers.
Yes.
That's a crossroads.
Yeah. Please continue.
That is a power place.
Right. Yeah.
And when you talk to the mountain, you call to the spirit of the mountain.
Right.
And you said, I want to talk to you. So it came to talk to you. And you were asleep, vulnerable. You protected yourself. And that's probably why it got angry. You want to talk to me. Why are you not letting me talk?
Right. Interesting. I never considered that.
So if you go back in the next little bit, try to let down your walls a bit.
Oh,
it's going to be scary as hell to do that.
Sure.
But if you let down your walls a bit and just protect your core with that light.
Okay.
And allow it to speak to you. There may or even treat it when you go there, leave an offering to the mountain.
Interesting.
You might get a different aspect of it. Because if you say, I want to talk to you, and then all of a sudden it comes up to talk to you and you slam the door in its face, how is it going to react?
Sure. I mean, I did explain the next day, once I made the connection, I had sort of another one of those conversations, and I said, look, I apologized, but I said at the same time, I mean, you came in pretty hard, man. You came in pretty hot. Maybe give me 25% of that, 30% of that tops.
Yeah. Well, most of the time when we encounter something really powerful, it scares the shit out of you.
Sure.
And that's just the way it is. You're not used to that.
It kind of does, yeah. It certainly, yeah, that sounds not that far off.
There are amazing UFO stories in the book. What is your favorite one?
So, my favorite UFO story, oh, that's a great question. I mean, the egotist in me wants to say my own, but just because it was so dramatic for me, you know. But yeah, I would. What the hell? I would say that one. You know, my own, because I was out. It was probably grade 6 or 7. You know, it was just a young nerd. Me and my friend were up very, very late on New Year's, and it was snowing heavy outside. So we thought we'd be kind because we were all jacked up on off-brand Coca-Cola, and so we stopped playing video games and we went and shoveled.
Yep.
And as we were out there shoveling, by this time it's probably about 3 in the morning, and 'cause it was very heavy, wet flakes as I recall. And I was standing in my mother's front yard. My friend was there as well. And all of a sudden, now I remember it coming from over, I want to say Mount Revelstoke in front of me. My friend remembers this coming from Mount Boulder, which would have been behind me. So it's interesting we both perceive it coming from completely different directions. But either way, as we stood there, completely silent around us, I saw what I can best describe as a green flash in the sky above the mountain. And then all of a sudden, the air around me turned green. Not like a green light was shown on me, but like I was in green air, just the air itself had turned green. And I remember looking at my hand thinking, what the hell is happening? And then before I could really get my brain around it, it went. It only lasted a second or two, as I recall. But it was unmistakable. And my friend, he observed it as well, and he said, I don't know. But and after that, we just went inside. And I thought about that for years. Thought about it for years. And Aaron and I fell out of touch. But when I started writing Strange, I got in touch with him, and we went for lunch. And no, his memory of it was more or less the same as mine, apart from the direction that it came from. And of course, I mean, over the course of writing the book, I discovered there was another a green UFO story in Revelstoke. This happens south of town in an area called the Arrow. Well, it's near the Arrow Lakes, but it's all part of the Columbia River system. But this man and his son were driving, and they saw what they first thought was a helicopter above them, just over the trees. But then they realized the helicopter seemed to be wreathed in some kind of green smoke or green fog or green mist, and if it was producing a downdraft, which a helicopter absolutely would have, it wasn't disturbing the trees at all.
Okay.
And that is one of the stories that'll be going into the new version of the book. I heard that afterwards, but it's interesting stuff, you know. And so of course, you know, the color green has turned up in so many other places.
Yeah.
I interviewed a woman from Australia who witnessed what she thought was a comet strike in the Blue Mountains. She saw like a green comet coming towards her and her friends as they sat there on their blankets after a day of hiking. And she screamed. She said she closed her eyes. She screamed because she literally thought she was about to die.
Okay.
And she felt the impact, and she felt this wave of energy roll through her. But when she opened her eyes, none of her friends had seen it. She was the only one. But again, green.
There's been a lot of talk in the UFO circles being our version of fairies.
Sure.
The modern day fairy.
Right.
And a lot of people think earthbound spirits when they think fairies. So the green could be like an aspect of the earth.
Yeah, could very well be. I don't talk much about the good folk.
Yeah.
They prefer that I don't speak about them. I try to be respectful. We're on good terms now, but yeah, it could very well be.
Really, they don't like being talked about.
Sure. And I was very incautious in my speech the first time we did a show on the subject, and I believe that is
why they get upset. we give offerings daily,
Oh, okay.
and that way, like when we do Phalanx, which is an offshoot of the podcast we're doing right now
Right.
with Brandon, we talk about them and kind of debunk myths
Oh, interesting.
and bring up different aspects and whatnot, and whether or not we can go into their realm, they can come into ours, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can. I think not always intentionally. I've actually got a story about that if you'd like to hear it.
Go ahead.
So when I was a kid, maybe 4, my mom had my sister, and or I think it was after my sister, but she had some surgery, and she was in the she was in the Revelstoke Hospital, and my family had taken me to see her on a Sunday. So we were up there visiting, and my family, which was my grandpa and my grandma, because we would always get together on Sunday, they wanted to go, but I wanted to spend another couple minutes with my mom. So because I was 4 and I was a pretty, I've always been kind of a older than his years kind of guy. I mean, my physical age is rapidly catching up with my mental age, but once upon a time I was old for my age.
Yep.
And they told me, okay, he can take care of himself. You know how to get to the elevator. We'll be waiting for you in the lobby. And I should point out, the Revelstoke Hospital has 3 floors. Only 2 of them are in use, and the elevator only goes to those 2. So pretty hard to get lost.
Yeah.
So I hung out with my mom a couple more minutes, got into the elevator, pressed the down button, and what happened next, I still have no explanation for. But I believed the explanation my grandfather would give me for decades. And what happened is the doors in front of me opened, and the area it opened on looked like the lobby to the hospital. But it didn't look right. It looked blue. Like, the best way I can describe it is it looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. It had this sort of heavy, almost like a Michael Mann movie, like Heat or something. It just had this blue, gloomy cast to it. And there was like desks and maybe typewriters covered over. Maybe. And I remember being scared because I thought, well, this isn't what the lobby looks like. And I didn't understand what was happening. And finally, the doors in front of me closed, and then the doors behind me opened, and my grandfather said something like, "Oh, there you are." And I remember him carrying me. I always, and it's a long time ago, and I understand, memory can be fallible, but this is pretty solid. I remember asking him, because he was carrying me, obviously not for very long because I was 4, but he carried me for a little bit, and he was asking me, or I asked him, I told him what I'd seen, and he clearly had no answer. So he told me, he said, oh, well, when they built the hospital, they built both halves, of course, but that we could only afford to use the front half. So what you saw was the back half. And I kid you not, my friend, I believed that until 2017. And then I was listening to the Micah Hanks show, and he was talking about people who sometimes go places that aren't actually there. And I thought, I wonder. So I got a hold of my mom. She's worked in the hospital for a number of years. And I said, if I'm going down to the lobby and the wrong set of doors open, let's say the back opens instead of the front, would I see this? And I described what I described to you. And my mother's very, she's 4'10" and full of Italian fury. She's like, no, of course not. That's the hallway to the OR. Are you kidding me? And I said, would it be dark? And she said, no, it's the corridor to the operating room. It would be brightly lit. She said, it has never looked the way you're describing. And I thought that was unusual. So then, I want to say the same year maybe, I was back in Revelstoke, and there's a woman there who does readings, psychic readings. And I'm not normally given to that kind of thing, but my wife had gone to her, and she was very impressed with it. So she got me a gift certificate to go so I would experience it. Because there's no way I was going to go on my own. So I went, and after the reading, she showed me, like she had pages and pages of written notes. And one of the things she said, because I could write down questions. She never saw them, but I could write down questions. So one of the things I'd written down was, what happened that day in the hospital? And so when came time for me and her to, like, for her to tell me the reading, she said, "Your grandfather was here, and he said, 'Do you remember when you were a little boy and you used to drift between dimensions?'"
Okay.
And she had I hadn't told her the hospital story. I told a lie. She did see the question, but all I said, all the question was what happened that day in the hospital. That's it. She had never heard any of the other things I told you, and that was her response was, "Do you remember when you were a little boy and you used to drift between dimensions?"
That's very interesting. I have, throughout my life, I've had situations like that.
Oh, really? Could
But
you tell
it's
me about some of them?
yeah. Um, Actually, last night was one.
Oh,
I because I have sleep apnea, I stop breathing at night,
okay.
and sometimes it can be up to like 3 or 4 minutes that I'm not breathing.
Oh my
So
God.
my mind goes into a DMT situation, and I get kicked out of my body sometimes.
Interesting.
Last night, um, when this happens, it's the same sort of world, but it's different somehow.
Oh, so
It's
the same as the world of your bedroom, say for example,
yeah,
but different.
but different, and
Okay.
it'll take on different shades of color. Blue
Oh,
is common
right.
for when you're in like a euphoric realm where things kind of seem like you're heavier, like you're moving slower.
Okay.
So it could be that uh, you're in a realm where time is slowed, and so
Oh,
everything kind of feels like you're moving through pea soup. Last
interesting.
night, I had a situation where that was happening. I was kind of moving slowly, but my wife was there. I got upset for some reason. I'm not sure. My memory's kind of failing me now because after a situation like that, it when I come back, I feel weird. It took me about an hour to go back to sleep afterwards,
Wow.
but uh, the situation was I got angry at her, and then she got into the car and went, "We don't have a car here," but she got
Oh,
into a station wagon, which we had when we first moved here in 2012.
fascinating.
But we got rid of it when we got here because it wasn't worth keeping.
Right.
And it looked as though it had had work done to it. So what this could be is every time we have a thought, a new universe can be created.
Yeah. Yeah, I literally just watched a film about this. It's kind of blown my mind, the timing of all this.
Yeah. So it yeah, st- this stuff does exist. And what you could have done when you were a kid, something snapped and your point of view went to it. Like you could have even held your breath for a moment,
Yeah.
and that's enough to put you into another realm.
I mean, when I was young, I had a near-death experience. And I don't remember how old I was, but I want to say this was before my sister was born, so it was before I was 4. I passed out from heat stroke, and I woke up. The last thing I remember, I have a very faint memory of not feeling well and of seeing the floor rush up at me, and I can kind of see like this red carpet, and it was at an arcade with my parents, so I remember there seeing like the corner of maybe the corner of like a big arcade cabinet, but next thing I knew, I was waking up in an ice bath.
Okay.
And so I kind of wonder if that may have influenced my ability to have those experiences.
That would. When I was born without breath.
Oh,
So they resuscitated me. My mother died at the same time and was
oh,
resuscitated as well. And her and
wow.
I, throughout, have had weird experiences.
Okay.
So anyone that's been close to death, you retain the ability to go to the other side.
Right. Interesting.
And so throughout your life, these experiences that you've had may be a result of that one incident where you came so close to death that you now have the ability to see and experience these entities and the ability to move in between.
Yeah. Oh wow. That's. I mean, I think you might be onto something there. Something else you said really kind of twigged with me, and I'll just tell you quick. But
Yeah.
you just talked about how in that version of you,
Mm,
you guys still had the car and you kept the car and you cleaned it up and
yeah.
done the work to it. Well, one of the most powerful dreams I've ever had thus far, I should say, involved me being in Revelstoke. I'd say like I've been here in Victoria for 17 years this year, but sorry, 15 years this year, 15 years. But in this dream, I was in Revelstoke and I was back visiting family. Now, in the dream, I was gassing up at a gas station that's overlooking a part of town known as Lower Town. Now, in real life, that like in now, at say when I had the dream, say 2015 ballpark, or say 2017, that hadn't been a gas station for 30 or 40 years. But in the dream, it's a gas station, and I'm filling up there. And my family, we ran a small store in Revelstoke for 6 years. We ran a deli.
Mhm.
And now in the dream, as I'm gassing up my car, and I'm there with a friend, I don't know who, these two little kids come running out from behind the station. Now this is on top, like I said, this is on top of a hill. So in real life, behind the gas station, there's a bunch of like a high bushes, and then just a drop down to the park below. There's a little kids park down there. It's quite a drop, quite a ways down. And these kids came running out from behind the building, and I remember in the dream I recognized them. In the dream they were regular customers at my family store, which we had since sold and I'd moved on. And so as I'm gassing up, I say, "Oh, hey, it's so nice to see you guys. How have you been? How are your parents?" And they said, "Well, tell you what, come see our parents. They're at home. They would love to see you." So again, dream logic. I say, "Yeah, get in the car. I'm just about done gassing up, and we'll drive there." And the kids say, "No, no, 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 no. We have to walk." And I said, "Okay." And the little boy says, "I made a path." And I said, "You made a path?" And he goes, and he smiles and he says, "Yeah, I made a path." So I'm kind of humoring him, like, because he's a pretty small kid. I'm like, "Oh, sure, sure." So we gas up the car, and I let the kids lead me, and they lead me behind the gas station. And set into the hillside are these wooden steps, they're planks, with stamped tin plates set into the middle of them. And I don't remember what the stamping was on the tin. I just remember there were stamped tin plates. And the railing going down was a heavy chain strung between wooden posts.
Okay.
And I remember it was so steep, I had to focus on my feet. I couldn't even look where I was. I had to focus on my feet. And at one point in the descent, I remember hearing what sounded like a waterfall or a river, like a rushing over, like all around me. And then I was at the bottom, and I stepped through a hedge, and I was on a dirt road, me and the person and these kids. And the road went off to the left and to the right. The kids ran off to the right where the road went up a little bit. It's kind of just high enough you couldn't see. But along the way, the kids had also run over a short bridge. This bridge was made up of sticks about 2 inches thick, like slats almost. It wasn't a very long bridge. It was maybe 2 feet long. And so I crossed the bridge over the water, and at the top of the hill, I saw this guy walking from right to left, and I remember thinking, he looks familiar somehow. Why? I feel like I know that guy. Didn't think anything else of it. Got to the top of the hill, and the kids had run off down to the right, down out of sight, down another hill. But to my left, I could see Revelstoke. And I remember thinking, Jesus, how did I get so far out here? Like, we didn't walk that far, but I could see the whole town. And I thought, well, that's odd, but whatever. So I go down the hill that the kids went down, because they're saying, follow us, follow us. And there's this long mountain valley. This long mountain valley that does not exist in real life. And the sun was starting to set, and darkness was kind of slowly gathering at the end of the valley. And I remember passing these rows of cottages along this dirt road, and inside, the ones I could see that were lit up, they were this weird mashup of furniture. There was like an Airstream fridge with a 1800s, wood stove. There was it was all weird jumbles of stuff. And in one of the cottages, one of the houses, I thought I saw the outline of kind of a heavy-set woman cooking, but she was it was like glimmering. It was hard to see her. It wasn't, again, it was like almost like a gossamery silver outline. Yeah. So you couldn't always see her. But anyways, kids kept saying, come on, come on, come on. So we followed them to the house at the end of the row. And beyond the house is this wide valley. And it's getting dark. And I believe there's a river that runs behind these houses going off into the distance. And so the kids, their parents are there, and we catch up, we shoot the breeze, but they're weirdly reticent to talk about themselves. They're weirdly they don't want to, they want to know what I've been up to, but they kind of demur whenever I ask them about them. Finally, they say, would you like to come in for dinner? Because we're just about to eat. And my friend and I say, yeah, sure, absolutely. So they lead us into their house, and all I remember is the dining room. It was long, rectangular, with wooden paneling at one end, or one side. And the other side was a series of massive windows which looked out into the valley. By this point, the sun is set, and it's starting to get dark even darker in the valley. So we sit down to a meal, and I remember very distinctly, the one food I remember seeing there were these gorgeous chocolate chunk cookies. And I love chocolate chunk cookies. So there's just this massive, beautiful looking, incredible looking cookies. I wanted them more than anything. And the couple and the family, they sit down to eat. And they say, help yourself. But something tells me, don't eat the food. Don't eat the food. And so I said to my friend who had sat down next to me, we're not eating. And the family knew. They knew, but they didn't comment. They just kept eating. So after dinner, they asked me to help them move the tables away. And I did, because they said they had guests coming. And by this point now, the moon had risen and was shining into the dining room. And the guests started coming in, and they started dancing. And among the guests was a heavy-set woman who looked very much like that gossamery outline I saw in the cabin. And as the music played, these people were dancing. And as they moved through the moonlight, every single one of them, I could see through them. And it hit me. I remembered why the parents would not talk about what they'd been up to. They died in a car wreck. And all these people were dead. This was the land of the dead. And this was their food, and that's why I didn't eat their food. And as I had this realization, the dancers sped up. They danced faster and faster and faster, and then I woke up. And now that's intense, and I'm getting chills talking about it now, but I was contacted by a friend of mine. And a friend of mine said, oh man, I have these weird dreams sometimes about this like fantasy valley outside of Revelstoke that doesn't actually exist. And he told me where he thought it was. He said, it's on Mount Begbie. In the dream, it's on Mount Begbie, which is across the river. And I realized that the viewpoint I had on Revelstoke in that dream, where I recognized all four of the roads going in and out of town, and I wasn't on any of them, put me in exactly the same place as his dream valley.
Wow.
Yeah.
So both of you had the same
We're both going to the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also, I later, and this is a whole other subject, I did a spot on Paul Bestel's Mysteries Monsters talking about the second geography of Revelstoke, but I've dreamed about a road south of town or north of town rather, that doesn't exist anymore. I discovered recently that I'm actually dreaming about the old highway, but I never drove the old highway. It was decommissioned long before I was born.
That sparks memories for me too. A lot of people have spoken about experiencing things that are outside of their time.
Interesting.
And it myself coming home from work one day, I found myself walking along a dirt road.
Okay.
And in where Tattersall Drive is.
I do.
That used to be a dirt road for a long time.
Oh.
Back in the 70s.
I had no idea.
And this building that I live in is right in the center of that street.
Oh, wow.
So it existed then as well. This building's been here for at least 60, 70 years.
Right.
And so I came in, the layout of my apartment was different. And my wife was here. She had a twin sister. She doesn't have a twin sister here.
Oh, interesting.
And her twin sister, I remember getting angry because first thing I thought I saw was my wife kissing another guy, and it was her sister kissing her boyfriend. And then I noticed her behind cooking.
Ah, that's so specific for a dream, I guess.
It wasn't actually a dream. This physically happened to me.
Oh,
I came home from work, picked up a package that was here for us, came up the stairs, and everything was weirdly different. And then when she turned and said, if I was asked if I was ready for supper, I said yeah, and then I shut my eyes, opened them, and I was in the apartment by myself.
Holy shit.
It was like a weird time shift.
Yeah. Well, almost like you were in that other person's body, that other version of you.
Yeah.
And then you snap back. Again, I just watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. That happens in the film.
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
So when we look at time, we kind of need to look at it like a ball of yarn.
Right.
With many crossroads where we can kind of step in between past, future, whatnot. So your dream could be something along that lines. It could be there is our afterlife that moves along with us, and you stepped into that in your dream.
Yeah.
Or
maybe.
were aware of it in some way.
Well, the idea, when you mentioned in this other place your wife had the twin sister, one of the things that has come up in my dream is that, that I realized about that dead people dream, was that in my life, like in the real world, I did have customers who were in a car, who had two kids, who were in a car crash, but they survived.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, but in the dream, it felt like exactly the same people, but they hadn't survived. And so I wonder, maybe I was party to some place where there's a different version of them that didn't make it.
That could be.
Interesting.
That could be. It's very interesting. The world is weirder and more wonderful and scary than we would expect.
Amen to that. No argument here.
Can you tell everyone about Gremlins in Revelstoke?
Sure. So yeah, basically the Gremlins, all those stories, in the way the book is formatted, it seems like they're attributed to different people, but mostly I got those stories from one person who had been told them by different people. But essentially what seems to be happening is little tiny shadow people will turn up, and whenever it seems to start at the front door, generally speaking, if they're arriving at your house, and they bring with them electrical malfunctions and mechanical malfunctions and all kinds of lights flickering, all weird stuff happening. Sometimes the car won't work, and this happened to, there's a couple women in the same family it happened to, and both times, they were told by someone who knows, they were said, you got gremlins. And they said, what you do is you get a saucer of milk, you put it outside your door, and it'll stop. And now the first person who told me, the woman who first did this, she thought, oh, sure, I'm going to be feeding all the neighborhood cats. It's going to be real popular. So she put the saucer out, not expecting it to work, because they had brought gremlins back from her husband's late mother. She had passed on, and she had always joked about having gremlins. They thought it was just a figure of speech, but on the way home from her funeral, their car started breaking down, and then they started having tons of electrical problems. So she thought, screw it, I'll put it out. She did. And now where this woman lives is in a part of town where there are bears. Sometimes you get tons of neighborhood cats. That milk stayed completely untouched for days. Nothing touched it. And then the electrical troubles went away. And when her daughter had the same problem, she told her, you got gremlins. Just put out some water, put out some milk. They'll go away. And so she put it out, but she hid it, which I think behind a potted plant or something. And still, nothing touched it, and the electrical problems stopped.
That's awesome.
And from what I was told by a woman who works at one of the senior citizens complexes there, if she's working, she's very sensitive. If she's working, she puts out an offering, no problems whatsoever. If she's not working, none of the other girls do it. There are electrical malfunctions. They've had pipe breaks. Never happens on her shifts.
Okay. That's a little people thing. When you're trying to attract a little person,
right?
Put out milk with honey.
Okay.
Grains. Any type of small offering like that.
Right.
And it'll attract their attention.
Oh, okay.
And if you have one that's misbehaving, you put that out to appease them. They'll stay in the area and they'll actually flip their script and start helping you.
Oh, interesting.
And so, like, pipe breaks and stuff like that wouldn't happen when she's there because she's paying attention to them and saying, hey, I respect you. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm really kind of curious to see if we have, you discussed that sometimes you have anomalies turn up in your recordings. I'm kind of curious to know if we have one because it's not it has happened in past for me. And certainly given the conversation topics, I think increases that likelihood.
I think we're probably going to have a few that that might be very interesting to go back. And like speaking of going from this realm to the Fey realm and back,
right.
in that one episode where we were talking about doing that, we had a little voice say, yeah, this happens.
Really?
And we were talking about another part where they could take you to that realm, and it disagreed with us. It said, no, we can't take you to our realm. It said, no. It was emphatic, no, you can't do that. And it's basically, it can take us there if we agree to it.
Right. Hence the accepting of food or things like that.
Yeah. And if you accept food in that realm, you are doomed to stay there.
I've heard that.
You can't come back. And so, and like in PEI, a guy was taken for 2 months and then appeared back home, was unable to speak for a number of months afterwards. I think it was 2 months after. Didn't remember anything. And then when he got his memories back, he would not talk about his time when he was away.
Really?
He would not ever talk about it till the day, even to the day he died, he did not speak about it.
Wow. I'll be honest, that's one of the few things I have like this instilled fear of, is being taken or going somewhere and not being able to come back. I've never actually told anyone this, but I have location services turned on my phone, and one person in the world has access to it. Because I don't like surveillance state stuff. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
But I have location tracking turned on my phone, and one person knows that. One person has the password, and they just in case something happens, they at least know the last place I was.
Yeah.
And I've always said, if I go, it's not by choice, not intentionally. So come looking.
Yeah, definitely. Bigfoot, fairy, cryptid, or other?
Ooh, you know what? Depending, well, I like to say he's an alien because it drives my co-host Paul crazy. Paul, in case you're listening to this, you know it's true. But in actuality, I don't know enough to say. I tend to think there is more of a metaphysical quality to him than just being a wood ape, but I don't have enough background to say that with any authority. That's, yeah.
When you look at all of the stuff, it's kind of hard because it runs the gambit.
That's it.
And so saying I don't know is probably the best thing that we can do for ourselves.
Nothing wrong with not knowing.
Yeah. It gives you a reason to keep striving for the next step in the process.
That's it. Except you and me, Paul, we know it's aliens. I hope he listens to this.
I hope he does too. Do you believe in the spirit of place? And do you think Revelstoke is such a place?
So when you say spirit of place, what do you mean?
Spirit of place is, it has its own archetype, its own energy. It's like its own entity.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Absolutely. The best example of that I can give, and I know I've kept you on here much longer than you anticipated.
That's cool.
You poor fool. But I don't go south of town past a certain time of night anymore. But when I did, I would go, because Revelstoke is a very small town. As I mentioned, 7,500 people. I'll be back visiting my family, and most of my friends work 9-to-5 jobs. The sole exception was my friend Sammy, she was a paramedic, so she kind of worked weird hours. So she would come for drives with me, and she's not really sensitive to any of this stuff. But one night, we're out for a drive, and again, ordinarily going south of town, the paved road used to end at a place called Greenslide, which is Greenslide Road. Now, once upon a time, before the Columbia River Valley was dammed up, there were a number of communities if you kept driving. There was Beaton, Burton, Arrowhead, Kamaplix, all these little towns that were flooded when the river was dammed. So when that happened, the road also was flooded out. They built a new road on the other side of the river. But if you keep going past Greenslide, eventually the road goes right into the river valley. And you can go down as far as, I think it's called 12 Mile, maybe a little bit further, but there used to be a ferry crossing there. And so when you're driving that road, you can still see sometimes, if the river's low enough, you can see the foundations of submerged homes or of long gone homes, and you can see the ferry landing as well. But again, at nighttime, that area is dark, dark, dark. So everyone I knew gets to Greenslide, turns around. Even if you got a truck, you get to Greenslide, you turn around. Well, one night, Sammy and I were out driving, and I got to Greenslide, and it was so incredibly bright. I've never seen it so bright. It was beautiful. The stars were up. It was just gorgeous. So we kept going. And now I used to have, my car was an '09 Corolla. This is not an all-terrain vehicle. But still, we kept going, minding the potholes, because this was dirt road. Eventually, we got to the valley. And I've never seen the valley at night before, because it's always so freaking dark. You just get the sense that you're not welcome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And then something shifted. And I kid you not, man, I saw darkness flooding back up the valley. Like it was filling the valley like a basin.
Okay.
And I said to my friend, I said, well, we should go. And she noticed that something was up. And she said, what's wrong? I said, don't worry about it. But as the darkness overtook the car, which it did, it traveled much faster than us, she actually said, how did she say? Something feels creepy, or I feel creeped out. Which, again, for her is so unusual.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and so I think that was whatever lives there, whatever is the most powerful spirit there, I think it was away. And I think that it became aware of us, and I think it came back. So I think that is a big part of whatever is Revelstoke's place. And to be honest, I actually have attempted to reach out to that spirit via meditation from Victoria. And I have had responses. So there does seem to be, I mean, it could just be me talking to myself, but it does seem like there's something there. And it said it's very old, is how it described itself. I said, am I any kind of threat to you? And it actually seemed to think it was very funny, and it said no.
Are there any other areas that you know of in BC, like Revelstoke?
I mean, no, but that's because I spent years talking to people in Revelstoke and grew up there. I mean, I know there are definitely places of power and strangeness. There's Kamloops, BC, has some pretty intense mojo, especially the certain nights feel very, very dark and very ragged there. And there's a place just, I want to say east of town, which is particularly dark at night. There have been, what's it called? Turtle Valley is also outside of Kamloops, and that has major mojo. The Fraser Valley, the Fraser Canyon, which is the old highway, that also has some pretty heavy mojo. I don't know anything about it, but you feel it when you're there. It's the river, something about that river. It's a very, very powerful river. And I mean, obviously Victoria. Victoria's got a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I don't subscribe to most of the traditional stories here, but I've talked enough to people to know that for example, there's at least one hotel where the maids don't have to clean certain rooms by themselves.
Okay.
So, I mean, nowhere it's intensely in Revelstoke, but then I also haven't studied other places as intensely as I studied Revelstoke.
Well, home is a place where you kind of learn the ins and outs regardless.
That's it.
And when you have the opportunity to go back for something like writing a book about the area, you learn a whole lot more about it than you would probably expect.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was very, very much my experience. And I imagine now with the expanded edition of Strange, I'm going to be doing a little bit more research, and so I imagine I'll probably learn even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Let us know when you do.
Shall do.
Well, is there anything that you would like to promote before we get off here?
Come check out Ghost Story Guys. That's how I make my living now. I'm very lucky to be a professional full-time podcaster. And ghoststoryguys.com, where everywhere fine podcasts live. I co-host that with Paul Bestel, who also hosts Mysteries and Monsters, which I recommend very much.
Awesome.
My other show is Largely the Truth with Brennan Storr, and that's a non-paranormal talk show where I just interview people who seem cool. So my most recent episode, when this comes out, will be with the Addams Family, directors of the film Hellbender, which just arrived on Shudder.
Oh,
and
excellent.
Yeah, super cool people, very, very kind. And like I said, I also produce the podcast LukeLore for Luke Greensmith. That's a short-form folklore podcast. It's about 10, 15, 20 minutes. And I also am part of Weird Together, the YouTube live stream with Joseph Camo. And Joseph is the host of a new show called In Search of Ghosts, which is also kind of part of the Ghost Story Guys family. So you can find links to all that at ghoststoryguys.com. It's a lot to remember, but ghoststoryguys.com. Yeah.
Okay. Right on. Well, thank you very much for coming on with me.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. This has been a pleasure. You've given me a lot to think about.
Same here. You've reaffirmed some of the things I've been thinking of. Brendan is an interesting guy, and one of the only guests we've met in person. We have become friends, and we definitely recommend his shows. Again, thank you, Brendan, for coming on with us. You're a gentleman and a super great guy to talk to. We hope you like this podcast and invite you to join us again. Please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platforms you follow us on. Take care, and we'll see you soon.